Hello, Reddit. I'm Laura, and I'm 28. I'm sitting on the floor of someone else's rented room right now, holding the keys to a house that no longer belongs to me. Or rather, it never belonged to me. Even though I grew up there, slept in the same bedroom for over 20 years, and took care of my mother until the very end in the same house. Today, I saw the windows of this house covered with bright pink curtains of the new owner, my stepmother, Valerie. And I don't know what hurts more, my father's betrayal, or the silence with which he did it. My mother died when I was 24. She died of cancer. It all happened so fast. We found out about the diagnosis in August, and in November I was holding her hand in the hospital room while she was taking her last breath. After that, the world just exploded, but I held on, because I thought that at least home was home. That was the only thing left of her. My father and I were close. At least I thought so. After her death, he became more silent, spent more time in the studio, started smoking again, but we had dinner together every Sunday, discussed renovations in the house, and planned how I would move back into my room after graduation. Everything changed on my 26th birthday. That's when he brought Valerie over. She was 10 years younger than him, with perfectly styled blonde hair, a perpetual smile, and perfume that stuck to the walls. He said he had been dating her for 6 months, that she helped him feel alive, that she was not trying to take his mom's place. I smiled then. I said I was happy for him. But I kept thinking, 6 months ago, he asked me to help him sort out his mother's things. Gradually, Valerie began to appear more and more often. At first, just for dinner. Then she stayed overnight. And then she brought her boxes to the basement. A year later, I came home for the weekend and saw that my mother's entire bedroom had been repainted peach. Her portrait hanging over the fireplace was gone. Instead, there was a photo of Valerie in front of the ocean in the same house where the three of us used to be. I broke down. I asked my dad where the portrait was. He shrugged his shoulders. She asked me to take it down. She said it was hard for her to live among the memories. And me? Is it easy for me? I started renting an apartment again. I came to the house less often. But from time to time, I would come to clean my mother's grave, pick up the mail, water the roses. All those things that no one else did but me. After Christmas, when I turned 28, I was finally going to ask my dad to sign the house over to me. Not now, but later. But I wanted to know that it would stay in the family. I even wrote a draft letter. I left it on the kitchen table. Dad did not answer. A week later, I received a message. Hi, Laura. Valerie and I have decided that we will re-register the house to her. It's not against you. It's just that she's my wife now, and I want to protect her if something happens to me. I read this 50 times. Protect her. It's not against you. My wife. All these words hit me like a hammer. I didn't answer. I just went there to see everything with my own eyes. And I saw a new number on the door, a torn-off sign saying Anderson family, and boxes of my mother's things thrown into the garage. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just picked up the rose my mom had planted near the porch. I transplanted it into a pot and left. Then I had another conversation with my dad. A cold one. A dry, this is my decision, Laura. I told him I wasn't coming back. He didn't stop me. A few months later, I found out that Valerie had put up for sale some of my mother's jewelry, the ones I thought were in the safe, and that the house was being renovated to become a cozy art villa. I tried to move on with my life. A new contract in the works. Coffee with a friend. Acquaintances that did not develop into something more. But home? It was disappearing, meter by meter, brick by brick, until it all came crashing down. And, to be honest, I was not happy. Because even when life gives you karma, it's not always sweet, especially when it comes after death. Translated with dpel.com, free version. 3 months after my dad told me he signed over my late mom's house to his new wife, I stopped answering his texts. They weren't hateful, just cold. Hope you're well. Valerie says hi. Still have the snow blower if you need it. Every time his name lit up my phone, I felt nauseous. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was how effortlessly he did it. How he could hand over the house my mom died in like it was just a property, a line item. How he could choose someone he met on a dating app over the daughter who literally held his wife's hand while she slipped away in a hospice bed. I blocked his number the day I found out Valerie had tossed out my mom's old photo albums. It wasn't until summer that I heard from anyone connected to him again. That's when Marcus, my dad's friend of 20 years, called me. He sounded weird. Flat. So my dad had collapsed in the driveway. Heart attack. Died before the ambulance even arrived. I didn't say anything. Not, "Oh my God." Not, "I'm so sorry." Just, "Okay." You'd think I'd feel something, grief, guilt, rage, anything. But all I felt was a strange kind of absence. Like someone had taken a wrecking ball to a house that was already abandoned. Still, I went to the funeral. Not for him. For my mom. Because he got to be buried beside her, and I needed to see that with my own eyes. The service was a circus. Valerie wore a black dress that was 2 inches too short and spent more time posing for sympathy hugs than actually grieving. She gave a speech. Said he was the strongest man she ever knew. No mention of me, or my mom, or the 25 years that came before her. Then came the will. Now, here's the part that caught me off guard. Despite giving her the house before he died, my dad left everything else to Valerie too. What little there was, savings, insurance payout, his classic car, all went to her. I wasn't even mentioned. Not a single word. And yet, Valerie had the audacity to come up to me at the reception, sipping wine like it was a party, and say he wanted to reach out before it happened. I told him he needed space. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us. Forgive us. I stared her dead in the eyes and said, "You don't get to ask for forgiveness for something you were proud of." Then I walked out. That night, I stayed up till 3 a.m. staring at old pictures of my parents. Their wedding. Christmas mornings. My mom in the garden she loved so much. The one Valerie replaced with concrete pavers for her meditation circle. The grief came crashing in. Not for my dad, but for the idea of what he could have been. The father he pretended to be. Weeks passed. I started trying to move on. But Valerie? She wasn't done. Because when the probate process began, I got a letter from her lawyer. It said I had 30 days to vacate the garage unit behind the house, the one my dad let me use for storage. Apparently, it was now private property under sole ownership. She was evicting me from a shed. Over boxes. Boxes of photos, clothes, keepsakes. My mom's old sewing machine. My childhood piano books. She didn't want the stuff. She wanted me gone. So I went there one last time. To pack. The front yard looked completely different. New pavers. Bright-colored lawn chairs. A big umbrella with Valerie's initials embroidered into the fabric. I went in through the side gate. The shed still smelled like my mom's old linen closet. I stood there for a minute, just breathing it in. Then I saw the bag. A small box bag shoved behind some crates. I opened it, and inside were legal documents. Not new ones. Old. Dated nearly 2 years before my dad died. One was a copy of the original property deed. My mom's name was on it. Sole owner. Paid in full before they got married. Then another document. It was a living trust she set up before her diagnosis, listing me as the beneficiary for the house in case anything ever happened to her. It had never been filed. It needed a signature. His. But it was dated just 2 weeks before she passed. And he never turned it in. Instead, he sat with me at her bedside and told me, "We'll make sure everything she left stays in the family." He lied. I took pictures of everything. Then I put it all back exactly where I found it. That night, I didn't cry. I started researching. Property law, revocable trusts, state inheritance clauses. And that's when I found it. A loophole. If a trust was written, signed, and witnessed, it could still hold in court under intent to execute, even if not filed, especially if the reason for delay was due to medical incapacitation. And guess who had been in and out of the hospital in her final days? My mom. I dug deeper. Found the witness. Her hospice nurse. She remembered my mom clearly. She cried while signing that she told me. Said she just wanted her daughter to be safe. I thanked her. Then I called a lawyer. He listened. Took the case. Told me it would be hard, but possible. Because if we could prove intent, we could challenge the transfer of the house to Valerie as fraudulent. And if that worked, I could take it all back. But that wasn't even the end goal anymore. What I really wanted, to expose them, to make sure people knew the truth. Because they'd erased my mother from her own home. But she wasn't gone. Not yet. And I was going to make damn sure that when this was over, neither of them would ever forget her again. 2 weeks after I met with the lawyer, I got a call. Not from him. From Valerie. She left a voicemail like we were old friends catching up. "Hi, Laura. I just heard from someone that you might be revisiting some legal things? I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, but let's talk. I'd hate for you to waste your time. Let's be civil, okay? She sounded nervous. Good, because for the first time in this entire nightmare, I wasn't. The lawyer was clear. If we could prove that my dad had deliberately ignored or hidden my mom's trust, the one that named me as sole inheritor of the house, we could invalidate the transfer to Valerie, especially because the house was fully paid off before their marriage, meaning it never legally became community property. It was supposed to be mine. He called it an uphill battle, but one worth fighting. He told me to prepare for war, and I did. The first thing I did was go back through everything. Emails, old letters, texts between my dad and me after my mom died. And that's when I found something. A text dated 3 months before he introduced Valerie. Your mom left something for you. We'll go through it together when I'm ready. I remember that day. I was packing her old clothes into boxes and crying on the stairs. He was sitting in a rocking chair. I asked what she left me. He just shook his head and said, "It's not time yet." I never saw it. Now I knew why. The lawyer said that if we could get the original trust admitted into probate court, along with supporting evidence that my dad knowingly withheld it, we had a case. The nurse agreed to testify. I filed a claim. And then Valerie countersued for harassment. Yep, she claimed I was emotionally manipulating the memory of my father and that I was weaponizing grief to retaliate against a grieving widow. I almost laughed when I read it. She attached a 3-page letter to the court where she called me unstable, vengeful, and said I was obsessed with trying to erase her from a home she had lovingly restored. Restored? She bulldozed my mom's garden, ripped out her wallpaper, and threw out her wedding dress. Lovingly restored my ass. The first court date came fast. Small room. Judge with glasses at the end of his nose. Valerie sat with her attorney in an expensive black suit and crocodile heels. She wore a long black dress, like she was still mourning. She didn't look at me once. My lawyer presented everything. The trust, the dates, the nurse's affidavit, photos of my mom with the deed. The judge listened, nodded, asked Valerie's lawyer for a response. And he said it. That phrase I'll never forget. The trust was never filed. That shows it was never truly intended. Then I stood up. My voice didn't shake. I held my mom while she died. I gave her morphine and told her it was okay to let go. She wrote that trust 2 weeks before her final surgery because she was scared my dad would remarry and forget me. She signed it. Her nurse witnessed it. My dad told me about it, then never showed it to me. He let that house go to someone who knew exactly what she was doing. And I'm done pretending like it's okay. Silence. Then the judge said, "We'll reconvene in 30 days with a ruling." Valerie tried calling me that night. 3 times. I didn't answer. Instead, I went back to the house, to the street, just to see it. And there she was, standing on the porch, wine glass in hand, like she was queen of the neighborhood. She didn't see me, but I saw her. And all I could think about was how my mother's hands built that porch. How she'd painted every shingle, laid every tile in the kitchen. How she'd planted roses because she liked the smell after rain. And now, it was some other woman's property? No, not if I had anything to say about it. 30 days passed. We came back to court. I wore my mom's locket. Valerie looked smug. The judge read the ruling, and it was one line. The court recognizes the submitted trust as valid and enforceable. The room spun. My lawyer grabbed my arm and whispered, "That means we won." I looked at Valerie. For the first time, she looked small, rattled, defenseless. And I realized she never thought I'd fight. She thought I'd fold like I always had. Smile, be civil, and walk away. Not this time. The ruling invalidated the transfer of the house. It didn't automatically kick her out, but meant the property wasn't legally hers anymore. We filed an eviction notice 2 weeks later. Valerie begged for time, said she had nowhere else to go. I gave her 30 days, the same number she gave me when she tried to evict me from the garage. And on the final day, I showed up in my car, parked across the street, and watched as a moving truck took away the last of her things. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't even look at me. Now, I live there again, in the house my mom built. I brought the roses back, repainted the walls to the color she loved, soft sage green. And in the living room, right above the fireplace, the old wedding portrait, The one Valerie tried to throw away. It's back where it belongs. Reddit, I never thought I'd fight my own father's legacy. But what he did wasn't love. It was betrayal masked as protection. He gave away my mother's home like it was some souvenir from a past life. And Valerie? She learned the hard way. You can't erase someone's memory just because you repainted the walls. The house didn't feel like home at first. When I walked back in with the keys, it felt cold, like a hotel room with the ghost of a stranger. Valerie's tacky crystal vases were still in the kitchen. Her beige throw pillows, her faux modern clock hanging where Mom's antique one used to be. The carpet smelled like vanilla and money, and none of it was mine. I didn't cry. I just opened every window and lit a lavender candle. Mom's favorite. Then I started packing everything that wasn't ours into boxes. One by one. The first thing I brought back was my mom's quilt. I kept it in a vacuum bag for years. I laid it on the bed and just stood there, staring at the stitching. She made it when I was 10, piece by piece from her old clothes. I remember that summer. She had music on in the background, wine in one hand, thread in the other. Dad joked it looked old-fashioned. She said, "That's the point." Now here I was, restoring every corner of the house she loved, and he gave away. A week after Valerie moved out, I got a letter in the mail. No envelope, just folded paper taped shut. It read, "I hope you're happy. You destroyed everything your father built. This won't make her proud. You've only made enemies." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so desperate. She thought I cared about enemies. She thought I did this to make her miserable. She still didn't understand. This wasn't about revenge. This was about restoration. The second week back, I went into the attic. It was untouched, just like my mom left it. I found her boxes of garden clippings, old recipes, stacks of letters tied in blue ribbon. But one box made me stop. It was labeled, "If something happens." Inside were journals, letters to me, some to my dad. One said, "If you're reading this, I'm gone." My hand shook. I read for hours. She talked about her fears. The cancer, the nights she didn't sleep, her hope that Dad would take care of me. And in the last entry, if he remarries, that's okay. Just make sure he doesn't forget us. He did forget. And for that, I don't forgive him. But she didn't ask me to hate him. She asked me to remember. And I realized this house, this fight, it wasn't about keeping Valerie out. It was about bringing Mom back in. I decided to rebuild the garden. I went to the same nursery she used to shop at. The old woman still remembered her. "She used to bring you in with messy hair and mismatched socks," she smiled. "Said you were her sunshine." I bought the same rose bushes, the same lilacs, the same lavender sprigs, planted them in the same pattern she did. Neighbors started stopping by. At first, I thought they were just nosy. But then one of them, a man in his 60s, asked, "You the daughter?" I nodded. "Your mom was special. Used to bring soup to everyone during flu season." We missed her. It became routine. Every morning, I'd water the plants. Every afternoon, I'd work from her old sewing room, now my office. And every night, I'd sit on the porch she painted with her own hands, just listening. Not to the traffic, not to the birds, but to the stillness. It was finally peaceful again. Then I got the second letter. Certified mail. From Valerie's lawyer. It read, "My client intends to challenge the eviction ruling based on emotional distress, financial instability, and previous contribution to property maintenance." I nearly laughed. She tried to sue me for kicking her out of a house she never legally owned. My lawyer said not to worry. It was a stunt, a desperate one, but it did one thing right. It pissed me off. So I did something I didn't think I'd do. I sent her something. An envelope. Inside, a copy of the original trust. A picture of Mom in the garden. And a sticky note. "She built this. You erased her. I rebuilt it. You don't belong here." I didn't get a response. Didn't need one. A month later, I heard from one of Valerie's old friends, someone who'd unfollowed me after everything went down. She said Valerie was falling apart. She couldn't afford her new condo. Had a breakdown at work. Got caught forging a PTO document and lost her job. I didn't feel joy, but I did feel done. She wasn't my problem anymore. She never was. Now, the house is mine. The garden blooms every spring. There's a small sign by the gate. The Anderson Home, EST 1986. Rebuilt 2024. I added it myself. Because I rebuilt this. Not just the walls. The memory. The roots. Reddit, people talk a lot about karma. They think it's loud and dramatic. Explosive. But sometimes karma is quiet. It's a letter in the mail. A voice not shaking in court. A woman who plants roses in silence while the world watches. 3 months after the court ruling, I sat alone on the porch. Same spot where my mom used to drink her morning coffee. She'd hum sometimes. Never songs I knew, just melodies that sounded like childhood. The roses had bloomed. Valerie was gone. And for the first time in years, I could breathe. Then came a knock. Not on the front door, on the side gate. I stood up, heart skipping, thinking it might be a neighbor or maybe a delivery. But when I opened it, it was my aunt, my mother's sister. And behind her, my cousins. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. Not because of fight, just life distance grief. That invisible wall that goes up when someone dies. But there they were, holding casserole dishes. I hope it's okay, my aunt said. We thought maybe we'd visit. She would have wanted us to. I just nodded. Try not to choke up. They stayed for hours. We sat on the porch, told stories, passed around photo albums. The ones I rescued from the attic. They laughed when I told them Valerie tried to renovate the soul out of the place. And then my aunt said something that stuck with me. Your mother fought for beauty in quiet ways. I'm glad you fought for her the same way. That night, after they left, I sat in her old room. Now mine. I looked at her old perfume bottle, sprayed a little, lavender and bergamot, and I said out loud, I hope I made you proud. Then came the letter. Again. But this time, it wasn't from Valerie. It was from my dad's attorney. Apparently, there had been one final file, something he'd left with the lawyer weeks before his death. Not part of the official will, just a letter. For me, it arrived in a manila envelope. Handwritten, old-school cursive. I debated whether to read it, but eventually I did. Laura, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I doubt you're surprised. I was never the healthiest. I know you probably hate me. Maybe you should. I made mistakes, not just about the house. About how I handled your mother's death. How I handled you. I love Valerie. I won't apologize for that. But I should have protected you, not her. Your mother was stronger than me. Always was. I was afraid of being alone. But I was proud of you. Always. If I had the guts to go back and sign that trust, I would. I'm sorry you had to do what I couldn't. Dad, I didn't cry. I didn't forgive him either. But for the first time since the war over the house started, I let go of the weight. He made his choices. I made mine. And I chose to honor my mom's. I framed that letter. Not because he deserved it, but because it reminded me that silence is never protection. That letting someone else write your story is the same as erasing it. So I wrote mine, right into the walls of this house. Weeks later, I got a DM from a woman named Casey. She said, Hi, I'm Valerie's daughter. I know we've never met, but I thought you should know she's not doing well. She talks about you constantly, about the house, about how you turned everyone against her. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for what she did. You didn't deserve it. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I replied, You're not your mother. You don't owe me anything. But thank you. I haven't heard from her since. That's okay. Some stories don't need sequels. Now, life is quieter, better. The house is full again, of warmth, of friends, of light. I host Sunday dinners now, just like Mom used to. Same table, same mismatched chairs, same warmth in the air. Only now, I'm the one humming. Sometimes, I walk through the house and catch a memory in the corner of my eye. My mom folding towels in the hallway, her humming in the kitchen, my dad leaning in the doorway, watching her like he still couldn't believe she said yes. And I don't feel hate. I feel history and peace. Reddit, this wasn't about revenge. Not really. It wasn't about making Valerie pay. It wasn't even about winning in court. It was about restoring something that should never have been taken. Not just the house. My mother's legacy. Her fight. Her fire. Her quiet refusal to be erased. So when people ask me if it was worth it, the legal battle, the court hearings, the stress, I say yes. Because this wasn't just a house. It was a memory. A promise. And now, it's a future too. Thanks for reading. And if you're ever sitting on a secret, a document, a promise someone made to protect you, don't let it rot in silence. Fight for it. Because I promise you, if it matters, it's worth the war.